Yes, hello, back again for another episode on 8 Eagles Gather. My name is Sig Erickson, and it is today the 19th of May. And so I'm doing a presentation here right now, and I'm going to call it the 60s. And when I look back on my whole life experience, and I was basically a teenager during the 1960s, it was absolutely my favorite time of my entire life. And I suppose that means that it was kind of the grounding place of what I was going to do as a career, and how I was growing up as a teenager, and had a lot of influence in my life. And I always go back to that, and I say to people around me, basically I'm stuck in the 60s. And that's kind of a funny way to put it or whatever, but a lot of times people will say that, hey, I'm stuck in this era, I'm stuck in that era, whether it may be collections of certain items that are old from way back that they love to have, all the way from teddy bears to pieces of furniture to old vehicles and old cars. And I think we all love to see some of the restorations of a lot of the old vehicles, and brings back reminiscence of perhaps parents and grandparents and so on. But literally, I'm stuck in the 60s because that was the greatest time of my life. And in the early 60s, okay, I started out as a young teenager. I was in high school in Brandon, Manitoba, and enjoying high school and all of the kind of the extension of freedoms to us as individuals to do things at a high school level. And there I was associating with all kinds of friends, involved in science club, science fair, and taking projects into Winnipeg and so on. And then as I graduated from high school, I still didn't know what I wanted to do as a career, but I knew that I wanted to take my education a little bit further. And I enrolled in what was then Brandon College, now Brandon University to this day. And all of a sudden my dad said to me at one point in time, he says, well, what are your thoughts about going in perhaps and becoming a teacher? And all of a sudden it was like, oh my goodness, that kind of settles it. That is a good idea, because I love to talk to people. I like to engage with them in discussions and so on. So it seemed like a very, very good possibility for a promising future. And when I say 60s, one of the things that I remember too about the 60s, which I can make reference to later on, is the freedom we had. The freedom we had to do things, the freedom we had to make choices, not only in music, but in careers and clubs at high school, and then clubs in university. And I belonged to a group in university called the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, young people who were believers at that point in time as well as myself. I actually, in the 60s, toward the end of the 60s, gave my heart to the Lord, got baptized in the 60s, and so that just adds to the whole idea of how important the 60s were to me. But I want to mention something specific, okay, about the 60s that resonates me still to this very, very day, and has a very, very close reference on the things that are happening worldwide, which basically, in general speaking, in many, many countries, it's not good. We've taken definitely a tragic turn for the worse in so many different areas. It's like the whole planet is in battle and fighting one another and things like that. But in the 60s, I was one of my jobs, okay, as a young person starting off in the early 60s, was to deliver newspapers. And I delivered newspapers in the north end of Brandon. I could go and walk the streets and the back lanes in the dark any time of the day or night without fear of anything happening. And of course, I mean, you had to be reasonably careful or whatever, but there was no threats lurking on the side streets or in the back alleys, the back lanes or whatever. I had to do a lot of my collections from paper clients after I delivered the newspaper, so a lot of that was done when it got dark, and especially in the wintertime, obviously, it got dark a lot earlier. And then, as I delivered newspapers and things like that, I would win trips to Winnipeg because you got so many new customers and things like that. And the Winnipeg Free Press at that point in time had made it available that if young people that were delivering earned so many points or whatever for new customers, they would win trips to Winnipeg to watch the Winnipeg Blue Bombers play football and to have a little bit of free tour done by officials of the Winnipeg Free Press in Brandon. And there, right down in the center of Winnipeg, with a bunch of guys staying at one of the major hotels in Winnipeg, free of charge of course, we would run to the chicken fries place or whatever, maybe a block away or half a block away, race out there, get some food, take it back into the hotel without any fear of what we were doing. And that does not happen today. Sad to say. Very, very sad to say. And so those are kind of some of the freedoms that make the 60s particularly precious to me, because we did have that freedom. We didn't exploit it in any way beyond reason or whatever, but we could do things that everybody should be able to do in a free country that provides all the things that Canada did and was years ago. And the other thing that occurred toward the end of the 60s was 1967, when Canada celebrated its 100th birthday, and I went on a train with a bunch of other boys and whatnot. We boarded the train just north of Brandon and took the long trip to Montreal to visit Expo 67. And what a fabulous thing to go and visit the pavilions of all kinds of countries, China, Russia, all kinds of countries, and see what they were doing, and visit, stand in long lineups of people, no fear at all. One of my friends and I, we decided to go back early to our hotel, I guess it was, or we stayed at a college college residence in Montreal. It was called College Jean de Brébeuf. It's still a college in Montreal today. We left kind of in the semi-darkness, my friend and I, okay, in Montreal, young guys, young teenagers, okay, on the loose in Montreal, 1967. We walked through the streets, we crawled over fences through this cemetery on Mount Royal. Didn't know exactly 100% where we were going, but we headed in the direction that we thought that this college was in. Ended up getting right there. No fear, no harm, nothing happening of a dangerous nature whatsoever. And I look back at those times, Expo 67, and the things that we used to do, the freedoms we had, and totally enjoyed them, because those are the kinds of things that should still exist, especially in Canada and other democratic countries. That should still exist to a large extent today, but unfortunately it's not. And that is one very, very significant reason why I am stuck in the 60s, because they were precious years, they were formative years, growing up years. Not only was high school precious and open and free to meet friends and to be in various organizations and clubs, but also then into university, it was the same thing. You could pick your opportunities and go ahead and pursue them through studies or whatever the case may be. And like I said, myself involved in teaching, and I think, pretty sure if my dates are correct, my first engagement at full-time teaching was in the end of the 60s, 69 and 70 was my first time teaching. And the legal age then was 21. I was 20 years old for 2 months before my birthday in November, and I was teaching full-time high school students. So precious were those days, and to definitely be remembered. And on all of us that are perhaps turning a little bit gray or whatever, with the knowledge of what we experienced in the past, a lot of those things should still be happening today, but unfortunately we're not. And I would encourage every one of you to if you see something, say something, and then do something. Call your MLAs, your premiers of your provinces, people in Ottawa, and let them know directly how you feel about what is happening in the world today, and the fact that they can definitely do something about it and do a lot more than what they're doing today. So thank you very much for listening to this episode. We're going to do it continuing to smile and make the best of it, and to have faith and trust in our Lord God and what He is doing, because He's in charge of all things, and that faith will keep us united together and will keep us strong. And so bye for now, and we'll catch another episode just shortly. Okay, bye for now.